Ever hear the expression, a fate worse than death? This is it. The pain compared here to a scorpion's sting will be so intense, people will decide death is better. Suicide will look like a sane and rational option. After all, there's no heaven or hell, right? So there's nothing after you die, and that sounds pretty good right about now. There's only one problem. Suicide no longer works. You take the pills, nothing happens. You pull the trigger, the gun misfires. You jump off the bridge, you break your leg, but you don't die. You can't. Not for 5 of the longest months in your life. Months of agony, sleeplessness, and unending pain. But hey, look on the bright side. You've never been this thin before. As usual, the Old Testament provides insight on the New. Or is it the other way around? What's it like to be in so much pain that death seems preferable to life, only to discover that death is as elusive as relief? Job knew.
Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter of soul, who long for death, but it does not come, and search for it more than hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly, and are glad they can find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, and whom God has hedged in? For my sighing comes before I eat, and my groanings pour out like water. For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me, and what I dreaded has happened to me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, for trouble comes. Job 3:20-26.
The locusts from hell will teach man what Job's torment was like. In fact, Job's torment had been inflicted in a similar way by similar demonic spirits who had been placed under similar limits by Yahweh. But this time Satan's troops are inflicting pain on Satan's followers. Those who cling to the odd notion of fairness and loyalty on the part of Lucifer are doomed to disappointment. The wages of sin is death, and in this life, the devil is the paymaster. John goes on to describe these little buggers in detail. I'm a trained artist, but I confess no matter how I try, I can't envision what this must have looked like.
The shape of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth, and they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months.
This is a straightforward description of something John actually saw in his vision. Only time will tell if their attributes are visual or metaphorical. I suspect it's the latter. These are demonic beings. They are not known to have physical bodies in any sense we'd recognize. The beasts John described have no counterpart in the known world, but that doesn't mean they're not real.
And they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. 1 woe is past. Behold, 2 more woes are coming after these things. Revelation 9:7-12.
Abaddon and Apollyon both mean destroyer. The king of the beasts of the bottomless pit is probably the one who holds the key, Satan. Seriously this time, let's look on the bright side. Yahweh is still in control. He has placed limits on both Satan himself and upon these most foul of demonic beings, limits which they have no power to exceed. They may torment, but not kill. They may not hurt any but a select group, and they may only do it for a limited time. When does this 5-month period occur? Considering what must precede it and what must follow, I'd place it, and give this a speculation factor of 4, early in the second half, from approximately day 1350 to day 1500. Just a guess, of course. One woe down, two woes to go.
Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. Revelation 9:13 through 16.
The four angels? John used the very same Greek word that's used throughout the New Testament for the spiritual servants of Yahweh, angelos. It simply means messenger, but Yahweh's angels are never spoken of as having to be bound. In Revelation 12:9, when Satan's followers were thrown out of heaven with him, they are referred to there as angels. I believe, therefore, that these too are fallen angels, aka demons, who have been restrained in an unusual place, that is, not in the abyss with everybody else nasty enough to need locking up, in anticipation of their unique role. Strong's suggests that angelos is probably derived from ago, meaning to lead, and that's exactly what we see these four doing. They lead an army of 200 million soldiers on a rampage that ultimately kills a third of mankind. This is the second and final time in Revelation where the death of a specific percentage of the earth's population is prophesied. The first time was under the fourth seal judgment, when 1/4 of mankind was slated for destruction by the warfare, famine, and disease directly associated with World War III. Starting from a baseline of a nice round 6 billion, though the Earth's population already exceeds that today, that means that the fourth seal judgment will kill off over 1.5 billion people. The sixth trumpet will see the death of 1/3 of the remaining 4.5 billion, another 1.5 billion souls. These two events will kill off half the world's population between them, over 3 billion people. Actually, I expect the Earth's population to reach an even 7 billion as the tribulation begins. Give that a speculation factor of 8. It's a more biblically poetic number, even though it was never specifically predicted. 7 billion souls. The Earth is full. But the math is simpler with 6. Does this mean that the remaining 3 billion or so will survive until the end of the tribulation? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't. The cumulative 50% death toll is due to two well-defined causes, World War III and the horde of the sixth trumpet, which I'd characterize as World War IV. Easily another couple of billion could die from other causes. Executions for refusing to take the mark of the beast, smaller regional or neighborhood wars fought over dwindling food and water supplies, the general anarchy and violent crime that inevitably follows the collapse of established human government, punishments meted out by the central authority for sheltering believing Jews and tribulation Christians, infections and complications from the foul and loathsome sores that afflict the recipients of the mark of the beast, thirst due to a worldwide drought and accompanying shortage of drinkable water, disease left untreated because of the breakdown of medical services or the increased virulence of the germs that cause it, men's hearts failing them for fear, as it's described in Luke 21:26. You get the idea. There will be no shortages of ways to die that aren't included in the fourth seal or the sixth trumpet judgments. Another observation. The voice that sent the sixth trumpet's angel on his way came from the
four horns of the golden altar, which is before God.
In other words, the blood of Yahshua, if I'm reading this right, is demanding that justice be served to those who have refused to avail themselves of its atoning power. By doing so, these people are saying in effect, your sacrifice was pointless. We have no need of forgiveness or salvation. Go away and leave us alone forever. Okay, if that's what you really want, it's your choice. And what's that about preparing the demons for the hour and day and month and year? Is John saying merely that they are being readied for this precise moment, which is pretty obvious, or is he giving us the timeline? If the latter is intended, my guess would be that the clock starts ticking on day 1230 at the abomination of desolation. An hour, a day, a month, and a year later would put you at day 1621, a plausible conjecture at the very least for the timing of this part of the second woe. Of course, it doesn't matter on this side of the rapture anyway, whether my speculations about the timing of this or anything else are particularly accurate. What matters is that God's word is true. These things will happen precisely on Yahweh's schedule. On the other hand, we're given these specific time markers and odd phrases like a time and times and half a time and the hour and the day and the month and the year for a reason. It is incumbent upon us to at least try to figure these things out. The details could be a matter of life and death to those trying to make it through these times, and one gets the feeling that the tribulation saints aren't going to have the time and resources needed to study this through like we do. John isn't done.
And thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulphur yellow.
The description of the breastplates is a clue. If you look at this in the Old King James, they sound like weapons, fire, jacinth, and brimstone. But I believe the New King James Version renders them correctly as colors. None of the words in Greek are the usual nouns for the things they represented, but are all adjectives. In the case of hyacinth blue, it definitely describes a color. Other clues we need to factor in are that, 1, these people are probably not primary participants in World War III, that is, Russia, Dar al-Islam, Europe, or America, since they can still field an army of 200 million men. And 2, they are said to be from the east in Revelation 16:12, the sixth bowl judgment. Remember, in Scripture, directions are given in reference to Israel, so our modern conception of east and west, separated by the Pacific Ocean, is still in line with ancient biblical terminology. So what national colors are red, yellow, and blue? The only eastern nations populous enough to be remotely in the running are India, Indonesia, Australia, China, and Japan. Of those, only China fits the color profile. Its own flag is red and yellow, and its northern vassal Mongolia supplies the blue component. Japan, Australia, and Indonesia include white, so I'd say they're ruled out. For what it's worth, Vietnam also fits China's color profile. While the color thing proves nothing, it's strong circumstantial evidence that China is the home of this huge Eastern army. It's noteworthy that as far back as 1965, China boasted of its ability to field a military force 200 million strong, and they haven't gotten any less numerous in the intervening years, despite their brutal attempts at family planning. In fact, population growth rates may prove to be the key to this conflict. Since 1950, the total fertility rate in China has dropped from 6 births per woman to 2.4. India's, by comparison, has only been reduced from 6 to 4. These two nations are thus still expected to lead the world's population growth in the early 21st century, though the rates of increase are considerably higher in many smaller developing nations. At these rates, India's population will someday pass China's, potentially making them a perceived threat. These statistics are a time bomb for China. The average age of their population is rising. It will eventually reach the point where China will fear becoming too old to provide for or defend itself, at which point they could, for the first time in their long history, decide to strike out imperialistically beyond their own borders. Of course, the reason for China's belligerence could simply be a good old-fashioned genocidal land grab designed to cope with ever-decreasing harvests, a direct result of the diminished sunlight since World War III.